Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all our viewers that are joining us this evening for what should be an exceptionally special and memorable evening. I'm joined this evening by our very special guest, Pastor Alex Jesse, MBE, who is the founder and senior pastor at Highway of Holiness Church, as well as being the director of the Highway House Shelter for the Homeless. Good evening, Pastor Alex.
Good evening, Rabbi Penny. Thank you for having me.
An absolute pleasure. We are delighted that you are joining us this evening.
Good.
So, I just by way of introduction and perhaps preface, this is in fact the second interfaith dialogue and event that we as a community have hosted in the course of the last week. And some may wonder, we've already had it once. Why is it that I'm doing it again so soon? And the answer is that I genuinely and sincerely believe that if we want to bring about real change, lasting change, which we discussed earlier, then it is an imperative that we make sure that the engagement and the conversation is ongoing. And so I'm delighted that you so graciously agreed to take up our invitation to join us this evening. We really appreciate it, and we are looking forward to an engaging conversation, thought-provoking conversation with you about how we can hopefully move things forward.
Good.
So I think, Pastor Alex, perhaps by way of beginning, tell us a bit about your family, your background, where you come from. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you once again, Rabbi. I want to thank and appreciate also Mr. Edwin Shuka, through whom I got to meet you and got this invitation. I want to greet the entire congregation. And I want to say, my name is Pastor Alex Jesse. I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa. I came here in the mid-'80s, and I'm now a pastor of a church, Highway of Holiness Church. And we also are engaged in a lot of activities that we've done over the years, because we've always had the vision to be relevant to our community and to bring change. And so we started about 25 years ago on the Broadwater Farm Estate, providing supplementary education for underprivileged children in math, English, and science. And we did that for 15 years and did that every summer for 4 weeks. Some of those children today are graduates with bachelor's and master's degrees, and they are doing well. And we also provide the same supplementary education internationally, using the services of university students, mobilizing them to go into the poorer areas of their communities to go and teach children during the weekend free of charge, which we sponsor from here, and also teaching them math, English, and science. We do that in Ghana, we do that in South Sudan, Ethiopia, and a Gypsy community in Bulgaria. And so those are the things we do education-wise. Here, we run a homeless shelter, which we've run for 11 years as we speak, every single night, non-stop, 365 days a year for 11 years. And that has seen over 1,000 people from 60 nations that have benefited. They sleep in the church auditorium, they eat there, they bath there, we help them to get jobs, and then they move on. And that's what we do. And we are still doing that as we speak. So those are some of the things, as you said. We've also done things around youth TV, talk shows, helping young people to get a forum for their voice to be heard. And these are some of the things we've been involved in. And so that is a bit about myself. And I became a Christian in this country when I met my wife, who invited me to a church. And through that, I became a Christian. And that's my story.
That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Tell me something. So did you always want, the question that I'm always asked is, did I always want to be a rabbi? Did you always want to be a pastor? How did you end up being a pastor?
Being a pastor was not on my agenda at all. I came here to work and study. I was studying banking, and that was my plan to, study banking and go and make some good money. That was my original intent. until I met my wife, who took me to church, and then God's intent started happening instead of my plan. And so I started following the leading of the Spirit, and I found myself here, but I'm enjoying it. I won't change it for anything else.
Right. How long have you been a pastor?
About 25 years.
25 years. Incredible, incredible, incredible. And your efforts have been recognized with your MBE for your services to the community, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, yes. That was, I think, about a year and a half ago. Yes.
Wow. Congratulations. Tremendous achievement. Tremendous.
Thank you very much, Robert.
So tell us a bit about your work up to date, your person. You know, you've mentioned a bit about it, but what are you involved with perhaps during the COVID period? What's taking up a lot of your time? And perhaps share with us one of your most proud and lasting and greatest achievements.
I think during the COVID period, most of our residents were moved into hotels because they sleep in the church auditorium, so there was no means of self-isolating, and that was one of the challenges. And so they've had to be moved. We had to adjust things around, and then we have another cohort who were not sleeping in the church, but they were coming to our day center to have food to eat and things like that. But they were still on the streets, and so we provide them food on a daily basis. So we do it as a takeaway. So they come, they pick their food, and they go. And so that's the service that we are providing, and we do that daily. Today, actually, we started a new program where we are providing food for the community, not the homeless community, anybody. And we started it today in conjunction with an organization called Edible London. It's every Thursday between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And it's cooked food that people can just come and go. And we had a lot of patronage. And so that's where our thing has been. But in terms of the work that we are doing, the homeless side is the most demanding side, because it's a daily activity, and people are in desperate conditions now because of all that is happening. And so the demand is increasing. And so we are looking after the COVID to see how we can take things forward and get something that is more sustainable, and also for the long term, so that it will be established for the future, because it doesn't look like this problem is going to go away very quickly. In terms of achievements, I think for me, it's more to do with just being there for our fellow human beings and serving them. That's really my main achievement. That's what makes me happy, you know, being there for people when they need me. And so it's the daily getting up and meeting needs, Obviously, the MBE was a highlight, things like that. But I think sitting with individuals and having a chat with them and finding out where they've been and where they are now, and helping them to get on their journey to their destination, and seeing change lives. And I've seen countless change lives. And for me, that is the pleasure.
You know, it's very similar to the goal which we all have, and I think that's why we enter become ministers of faith, because we want to make a difference to people's lives. And as you've said, it's a similar experience, not working with the homeless, but working with people that are struggling during COVID. I think, you know, for many of us, we found it exceptionally meaningful and rewarding. So I can relate to what you described.
Sure.
So I want to move the discussion on, because, you know, it's been, as you mentioned earlier before we came on air, it's been a very, very difficult and challenging few weeks on top of COVID, with the terrible murder of George Floyd in America, which of course had a global impact.
Sure.
Both in America and of course even in Britain. What was your and your community's reaction in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder?
I think we have seen a lot of murders in the past, so it wasn't like a new thing. But what was different about this is that you saw the process of the dying. And that is what resonated with a lot of people. And when you can see somebody slowly dying where they don't have to die,
right?
But somebody's decided that's what I'm going to do, and it's in plain view, and people are filming, and it doesn't move you. That is different, and I think that is really what really resonated is the horror of it. It looks like it's a deliberate act. You know, sometimes people shoot and they say, "Oh, I had to defend myself." You know, I didn't know he had a gun or something like that. And you can say maybe the policeman had to defend himself. In this case, there was nothing like that.
I think you're absolutely right. We see so much on the screen all the time, in social media and videos and news 24/7, and it's very rare, I think, in our society that something has a shock factor.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this was like a moment, in a way, I'm not comparing the two, but it was like, I remember 9/11 when it happened, where I was, and I remember, stopping. It was a moment that we stopped where we were, and I remember just watching the same video of George Floyd's murder, and it was so slow and so painful to watch, and we felt so helpless.
Yeah,
I think it made an impression on every single person that saw it.
That's very true.
What was the reaction of your community? Well, what did they feel? Was it anger? Was it pain? Was it mourning? How did they react?
I think it was a mixture of a lot of things, but I think it was the horror, the horrible way in which he died, and there was a sense of collective mourning, and where a whole race goes into a collective mourning. And you can feel it. And that is really what it is. It's like your brother being stifled to death, basically.
Yeah.
You are watching it and you can't do anything. It's the helplessness.
Yeah.
It's the helplessness that comes with. That is another issue. And that is what resonated with myself, and I believe members of my community.
Sure. That was when we watched the video. You watched it, your community watched it, we all watched it, and we were all in horror. In the aftermath, there was a huge reaction worldwide to that video, and to seeing that, helplessly somebody was slowly killed by a policeman, by authorities, and no one could stop it. If you go back and you think about, because obviously in the aftermath of that, people started thinking about racism, and there was a tremendous anger and frustration about racism, across America and across Britain. What's your experience in terms of racism? Perhaps you can share with us from a young age until today. What's your personal experience, and what your community's experience has been with dealing with racism in Britain?
Okay, in terms of my personal experience, mine is a mixed one, because I've had very good experiences with the white race, and I've had some that are bad experiences. But to put it in context, I want to talk about a positive first, because I believe that in every race, there are good people in every race. I believe that. And, my father was a chauffeur in Royal Standard Chartered Bank in Ghana. So he used to drive the managers and stuff. Now I'm talking colonial days now, and pre-colonial. And so he got on so well with some of his bosses that he actually named one of his children after them.
Oh my goodness.
When the man finished his assignment and was coming to Britain, he actually adopted my older brother.
Oh.
and brought him to Great Britain. This is before I was born.
Incredible.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. Now, of course, that is one side of the story. And after my O levels in Ghana, I won a scholarship to come to Holland on a program called the American Field Service, AFS. It was set up after the Second World War to improve intercultural understanding, so that wars will be prevented. And I had a scholarship to Holland, and that meant I had to live with a Dutch family in their house for a year and attend a Dutch school for 1 year. We had people from different nations coming into the country that 1 year period. So I was there. I lived with this Dutch family for a year. I slept with them. I did everything with them. Very beautiful family. Okay. And I have contact with them up to today. I took my whole family there to go and visit them. They came here to come and see me. 2 days ago, we were on the phone. So that is the kind of experience I've had.
Right.
Okay? So that is one point. But then whilst I was in school, I was the only black boy in a school of about 1,200 children.
Where did you go to school?
In Holland.
Oh, in Holland, right.
Yes, in Holland, yes. When I went to Holland, in the school that I went, I was the only black boy. And the school was a massive school of 1,200 young people. And I was wearing a pair of jeans. And one of my classmates asked me, did I buy the jeans when I came to Holland? And I said, no, I brought it from Ghana. And she said, really? You mean you brought the jeans from Ghana? I said, yes. And they were surprised that I brought the jeans from Ghana. But this is 1981. Okay? So there wasn't a lot of exposure. And it was not Amsterdam. This is a small town called Doetinchem on the German border. So a lot of people have not been exposed to black people at that time. Black people were not traveling as much as we did now. But just wearing jeans, they thought you must have got it from Holland.
Right.
From Ghana. You understand?
Right.
These are some of the things. So, and of course, I'll be in town and I'll be the only black face, and you see people looking at you, children telling their parents, and things like that. So I've experienced that. But of course, that there was no hatred in that. It was just
so you were just seen as different. Was that the experience in Holland?
More or less, yes. So there are different shades, there are different shades. So that is the experience I had.
Right.
Yeah. So that is one side. But having come here as an adult working in this community, I face a different kind of racism. Okay. And that kind was where I used to work in the early days. I used to work in a factory, in a clothing factory. That was the only job that was available to us, most of us at the time. And there was a lot of disrespect. Your bosses would talk to you in a demeaning way. Okay. And that was one form of racism. Okay. And there was exploitation as well. I remember my first job, I was given £40 a week. So £1 for an hour in Old Street. I remember it as yesterday. Okay. So these are some of the things that we had to deal with, and people would talk in a derogatory manner to you because they knew that you didn't have a lot of options at the time.
Pastor Alex, I hope you don't mind me getting personal, but
sure.
How did it make when you heard this? Because we experience sometimes anti-Semitism. I'm just keen to understand, and I'm sure our viewers and listeners will want to understand, when he spoke to you in this demeaning way, what does it do to black people when they are treated in this way? What does it do to you?
Well, it has an impact on you as a person, but in terms of how you perceive yourself. Right. But I think there are different levels in it. Okay, there are different levels. By the time I came here, I've lived in Holland with a white family. Okay, I had white friends all over the world. Okay, so I had an image of myself before I came here. Yeah, so talking to me like that, yes, it's a bit helpful, but I could shrug it off.
Okay.
Not everybody can.
Right.
Now, I came here by my own accord. But if you have somebody who, against their will, was uprooted from their country, put on a ship, and shipped across the Atlantic, and has been dehumanized by the way they've been treated, lost their language, lost their culture, even their names. They have to take the names of their slave masters. So I'm talking about my brothers in America and in the Caribbean. They've suffered a lot. And when you lose those things, it affects your identity, because that's where we draw identity from. And when you lose language and you lose culture and you lose all those kind of things, and you know even the name you are using is not the name that you were supposed to be using,
right,
it has a great impact on how you see yourself. And so we must always take that into consideration, because that's a part that you don't see. It's an inner turmoil that people deal with, and you have to even overcome that before you can move forward. So it has an impact, but everybody deals with it differently. But we have to acknowledge that there are issues that people are dealing with, and sometimes it can come out in anger because of what is happening inside, you know. And so that is one aspect. But in terms of some of the discrimination that I've seen, for example, you know, we help homeless people here, and we've been helping homeless people for 11 years in Haringey. Okay, now the police bring us people. All the major hospitals discharge people to us, people who have no recourse to public funds, who otherwise would be discharged on the streets. There is no major hospital in London that has not discharged people to us. From Guy's and St. Thomas's to UCL to King's, they all bring people to us. Yeah, people who otherwise would go on the street. Residents of Haringey that we've helped. Now, about a year and a half ago, we were served an eviction notice. The church building that we use, where the homeless people have slept for 11 years, we were served an eviction notice to move. And so we told the council, why is this happening? And they said, well, you know, it's an industrial place, and we think it's not for the purpose for which you are using it for, and therefore you should move. Now we did everything possible to deal with it amicably. It didn't work. In the end, we had to get lawyers involved before eventually it was resolved. Now, what happened was that I didn't even think about it in racial terms, but during this time, I had a raid in our shelter from the Home Office.
When was the raid?
The raid is also about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
With Home Office people from the Home Office, with 10 policemen from Haringey. So they had to wait. The police had to wait for them to come in so that they can come in together. And there was this raid that they came, and I was interrogated, all kinds of things. And in the end, they found nothing. So a benefactor had given us a place in Islington so that we can house women, because the Tottenham shelter is only for men. They went there to talk to the women, and the man was asking me, I heard that you got a shelter in Islington for women. Do they pay any rent? I said, no. Pay any bills? I said, no. He said, so are you saying you give the place to them free of charge? I said, yes. Without any exploitation? Just imagine that. Okay. Now, and so they went there, spoke to them. They found there was no exploitation. Now, a vicar friend of mine, white Englishman, called me and he said, Pastor Alex, you know what? If you were white, doing the work that you do, with the impact that you've made, the government will have helped you, the council will have helped you, get you a building, give you whatever you need to continue doing what you're doing. You will not have gone through this. This is a white English vicar telling me this. It's only then that I clicked the racial aspect of it, because I don't normally work with that. It's not part of my thinking. But he pointed it out to me. Look, this is what is going on. And so these are some of the things, you know, these are some of the things. These are real stuff that is there. These are documented stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, what can I say? It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. You're doing, you know, clearly incredible work, you know, and you know, instead of helping, you know, they're hindering and trying to make problems for you. It's very upsetting to hear. You also mentioned about people feel a loss of part of their identity, part of themselves. It's so upsetting to hear. Very sad, very sad. I want to ask you, you know, I have to tell you, from the moment that we started chatting an hour ago, you are clearly somebody with everything that you've accomplished and achieved in life who is very positive, very upbeat. If you take, you've been here for a while now, you know, I mean, how many years have you been in the country now?
I've been here for 30 years.
How many?
Over 30 years.
30 years, that's what I thought. How, when you look back and you look at modern Britain today, 2020, and you look at 30 years ago, in terms of racism, in terms of bigotry and discrimination, where do you see we are and where do you see we are going? Are we, Pastor Alex, are we making any progress? Are we heading in the right way? Are things better or are they the same?
I think in a way, there are some legislations that have been passed over time with the intent of helping the minorities. You know, so you could call that some form of progress because an effort has been made. Okay, but in actual sense, we haven't made much progress. If you are looking at the results.
And what do you mean in terms of we haven't made much progress? In terms of opportunities or in terms of disparity? What are we talking about?
I think in terms of opportunities, we haven't made much progress. So you will see how COVID-19 came in and exposed a lot of things. Okay, so when we are talking about discrimination and stuff like that, it's wider than color, because equalities are very important. So you have racial inequality, but also you have educational inequality. So you have people whose quality of education is poor just because of where they live and the type of schools they go to. So it hinders their life chances. And that is a basic fact that needs to change. And so these are some of the things. There were health inequalities. We saw it in the COVID, the casualty rate of the mortality rate, and you look at the communities that died most. So this tells you, you know, and even life expectancy, you know, your life expectancy can depend on where you live and your postcode.
So Pastor Alex, let me just intervene. And I said that we want to really, really plumb the depths and get down to the real issues, hard talk tonight. Sure. So I've heard some people that have said there's no denying that people have less opportunities, they are worse off in deprived areas, and many of them are black, right? But some of those people make the argument, that's their argument, but their argument is that if you go up north out of London, they can show you areas which are white and you'll find deprivation, you'll find very few opportunities, poor education. You can go to Govan in Glasgow and you'll find, you know, a terrible deprivation. So how do we make head or tails? Is it that, you know, it's people of a certain socioeconomic position that find themselves with few opportunities, or do you think it's more specific to race?
I don't think it's more specific to race, because as the people pointed out, you can go to different parts of the country and see the same level of deprivation, and I know that to be true. So why is it that way? It tells you that even within the culture, the main one, that is the predominant population, we have a section of that population that are deprived from generation to generation, 3-4 generations, same pattern.
Agreed.
Yeah. So it tells you it's an issue of justice. It's an issue of fairness. So where did we get working class from? Somebody had to tag them like that, isn't it? It didn't just come, but there is a tag like that. So it tells you that if you don't pull yourself out of it, you'll be expected to stay there with that tag the rest of your life from generation to generation, unless there is a genuine effort that we are all equal. When we say equal opportunity, it really means equal opportunity, and everybody has an equal chance. But that is not the case.
Right.
And so across the board. So I wouldn't say it's limited to race, but of course, those who are in the minority have additional challenges in addition to these things that makes this a bit more acute. But
okay.
I agree, it cuts across.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Very, very insightful and informative. We've spoken just now about less opportunities, but there are, and I've been doing a lot of reading, Pastor Alex, so that I can become more knowledgeable, more understanding to the challenges that your community face. Now, one of the things that people say is that, that there are tremendous challenges in terms of the authorities institutionalized racism, and that, what is your take on that? Is that your experience? Is that something that your community complain about in terms of labels and names and the way they're treated in society?
There's definitely a complaint about that. Let's look at George Floyd. Now, if you're a police officer putting your neck on somebody, broad daylight, and you know you are being filmed, and it doesn't push you to stop, there is an impudence with that. And why is that? Because they have an immunity. And he knows that. He knows he has immunity to prosecution to some degree. And as long as the person knows he cannot be touched, he could do anything. We are all human. And so we need certain deterrents in cases like that. But when you think you can get away with it, you will do it. And that is what needs to be dealt with. But because it's in the institution, that the policeman will first be believed before anybody else. And he will get witnesses with his friends that are with him to say the same story. And by that time you are dead anyway, you can speak for yourself. And the person who saw it might not have the courage to show up. So the system that allows them to be immune,
needs to change.
That needs to change.
Okay. What do you see the clergy's role in the struggle over racism? What do you think that we can do? What do you think our faith communities should be doing? I mean, we've seen different, there's been protests, then we've seen riots and violence, statues being toppled. How do you, and what are you instructing your community, your flock, to do in terms of a response and a reaction to racism and the current climate?
I think from a spiritual point of view, I believe that the most powerful force on the planet is the power of love. And if you, that's the only thing that does not fail. And so in our protest, in making our voice heard, we shouldn't look fat of that. Okay. So we should be able to love even when we are being mistreated, because it's that ability to love when you are being mistreated that carries that kind of conviction that begins to impact another human being to begin to look at what they are doing because of your response, because they don't expect that kind of response. And so it is important that we do things constructively and out of the place of love, because when you begin to walk in love, love will speak for you and work for you. And so I think that's one thing. But as faith leaders, I think we should promote unity intentionally among ourselves, among our congregations, and we must speak publicly about issues. And also, there has to be education. We have to have education about each other's history. You see, we don't have a lot of that. Our curriculum is restricted to certain aspects of history, but I think it has to be broadened. So if I know your history very well, and you know my history very well, you are more likely to understand me because you know what I've gone through. If you are behaving in a certain way and I know your history very well, I can say, okay, maybe I must be more tolerant with him because I know what he's gone through. But when we don't know a lot about ourselves, we are just prejudiced, and that is the problem. And so prejudice is where a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. So it's the stereotype that you've been told. That is what you.
Agreed. I saw something recently by a educationist in America that said bigotry is, nobody is born a bigot.
No,
it's something that is taught. And she went on to say, if bigotry and prejudice is taught, it can equally be untaught.
Definitely.
And I think, and I agree with you, that whenever we have these difference of opinions between different parts of our community and our nation, it's through positivity, through love. That is the way that we're going to move it forward. I just want to ask you, in terms of the Black community's leadership, are all of them espousing the same ideas as you, as love and brotherhood, and condemning the violence, or are they different?
I believe in the faith community, as far as I'm concerned, most of them are. And I think it stems from the fact that the scripture says, God said, let us create man in our own image. That is fundamental. If we come to that acknowledgement and acceptance that all of us are created in the image of God, that is the foundation that we can build on. But as far as some think they are created in the image of God and some aren't, we are going to have a problem. So that acceptance that we are all created in the image of God, and therefore our value is the same, that becomes the foundation. Think about it. When we need, somebody needs blood and they go to a blood bank, they are just looking for their blood type. Any blood that they will get that fits them, they will use it. They won't ask whether it's a white man's blood or a black man's blood. Why? They are on the point of death. Okay? And they will use it. The scripture says that the life is in the flesh. Okay? So it is important. The life is in the blood. Okay? So because the life is in the blood, is the blood that is the source of that life. And that is common to all of us. And our blood, the color is the same.
Absolutely.
Organ donation, somebody needs a kidney.
100%.
Kidney. They are not going to ask, Oh,
a kidney is a kidney. A life is a life.
They won't ask you, oh, I don't want a black man's kidney. They wouldn't even.
100%.
They'll just
100%. 100%. I
so
want to ask you, Pastor Alex, I want to ask you something else. You mentioned before we came on that you felt that this time was slightly different because, after all, as I said to you, this isn't the first time that we could have had this discussion where there's been a racially motivated, racially driven attack and murder, and a horrendous crime has been committed. You said that you're more optimistic now. Is that reflected in your community? If you are more optimistic, share with us, what do you think can change? Where do you see, if I meet you next year and we have the same conversation on the 11th of June 2021, what are you hopeful for that will be different by this time next year and in 5 years and 10 years? Where do you see us going?
I think this particular incident carries a unique momentum. And I believe that from the way things are going, it's going to go in the right direction. There are a lot of young people from different races that are fighting. There are more white young people on the streets than black people. Okay, that should tell you something. It's gone global.
Mm. So you think that the fact that this is no longer a black only cause, but it's become a universal cause for equality, therefore you are hopeful that things will change?
Definitely, because you can't deal with racism on your own.
Absolutely.
It's a community where we live together, we interact with each other all the time. So without bringing everybody else on board, nothing will work.
Okay. So practically, tell me what is it that we can do as individuals, as a community, to assist, to work with the black communities and bring about lasting and real change? What is it that we should be doing besides protesting?
I think we should start on the individual level.
Okay.
We should start with how I talk to my children about other races and how you talk to your children about other races. I think that is important. Okay. Before the children go to school, there are things they've imbibed. Okay? So on a personal level, there has to be a change. So if we are talking to our children about other races, we must be watching what we are saying, because we can't give them a bad impression of another race and expect that things will improve. It won't. So that's personal responsibility. On our congregational levels, we must speak against racism, and we must make sure it's not happening within our own congregations as well. Okay? Now, it's not only racism, but there's also bias. Okay? We have to train ourselves not to be unconsciously biased, because that's what happens. Yeah. And instead of seeing people on an individual level, we see people on the collective. So we say he's black, he's likely to behave like this. But I haven't interacted with the man. Right. But because he's black, this is part of the racial profiling that needs to stop. So there is racial profiling that also goes on, and that is not right. So let's deal with people on an individual level. When you meet somebody, be neutral. And, and we build one from there. And of course, we need to, as I said, we have to create platforms of interaction between ourselves and our Jewish brothers, our white brothers, Hispanics, all of us, and make sure that, you know, there's something that we all have to acknowledge, that all of us bring something unique to humanity. There is something that every race brings to humanity that makes humanity beautiful. And
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. We know we have a saying in our Torah, in our liturgy, which says that you shouldn't judge another person. Al tadin es chavecha. Don't judge your friend until you reach his place.
Yes.
Which means, since I can never really be in another person's shoes, I never really know them, I can never really judge them. And therefore we have to stop making these labels and stereotypes and assumptions and just look at the godliness in every single person, which is exactly what you were saying earlier. So beautiful, so many beautiful ideas. So as do you have plans to work with other communities, neighboring communities, other communities? How can we move things on? You know, we're looking, if we look back in history, just to contextualize, we know, and I'm sure you're well aware, that next to Martin Luther King, when he marched and when he fought against racism and prejudices, was a rabbi who survived the Holocaust, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And there were many actually leaders of the Jewish community that had survived the Holocaust,
sure,
recognize what happens when mankind is at its worst and discriminates and is bigotry, and therefore they stood by his side and they worked together. We came together tonight because we want the Jewish community as a whole to work with your community, as I'm sure all the other communities do, and to do whatever we can to make these changes and to improve things so that racism is a thing of the past.
Sure.
Any thoughts before we close out for what can be done between communities?
I think there has to be the acknowledgement. The scripture says that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? That is an acceptance that humanity is depraved, okay, because of sin, and we all need redemption. And so we should start from there, that we all need help to get to where we are supposed to be. And that brings a form of humility, because when you begin to see you yourself have some shortcomings, then it helps you to be tolerant with your brother,
with someone else.
So those are some of the things that we do. But I think, as I said, a real integration, which is not superficial, but which is meaningful. So it's not that our children go to school together, they can go to school together, but can they visit each other in their homes? That is another level. Can they grow up and marry each other? It's a different level altogether. Now, these are the challenges we have to face. These are the things we have to face. And I think as faith leaders, we have to set the example. We have to set the example. And children follow the models they see. And we have to model it. Okay, so we can work together by creating platforms where we can speak about these things, demonstrate these things, engage with civil leaders as well, and say, look, this is the way to go, you know, and begin to use our influence in those areas, supporting legislation and things like that. But I think we need something more fundamental, because race is beyond legislation. You can't legislate it. It's something that we have to do together.
And I think that's absolutely true, and an incredible point. I would also make the point that I think what we are observing now, and I've seen many articles in the newspapers, we seem to see that the country is divided in a sense. There are those that want to keep the status quo, and there are those on the other side that want to bring about fundamental change.
Yeah.
And when you've got two polarized opposites, you're going to struggle to bring them together. And I think the faith communities, if I may say so, people like yourself that are so positive and so loving and so accepting, are the way forward, that we are going to be able to bring together the two sides and be able to, please God, move things forwards. I want to thank you, Pastor Alex. It's been absolutely fascinating. Before we close out, we did say that we were each going to say a short verse or a prayer for please God, a peaceful and a better, a more harmonious and respectful Britain and community. So I'd like to ask you to go first.
Okay, the scripture I have is in the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. It says that he has shown you, O man, and what is good, and what does the Lord require of thee? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And I think if we prioritize justice and be merciful to our fellow human being and walk in humility, our world will be a better place.
Absolutely beautiful. And I want to share one verse with you from Isaiah chapter 57, verse 19, which says, I'll say it in Hebrew and then in English, Shalom, Shalom, l'rochok v'lakaro, which means peace, peace to the one that is far and the one that is near.
Amen.
In life, it can be challenging sometimes to make peace with those that are different. And sometimes the challenge can be, as we all know, in our own family and friends situations, to make peace with those that are close. But our heartfelt prayer this evening, as we conclude this evening, is Shalom, Shalom, l'rochok v'lakaro, that we should have and bring about, Pastor Alex and your community, our community, and all the communities, peace to those which are far, those which are close. We should all become near. And please God, we should all come together this time next year and be able to look back and see racism as something which is gradually being eroded, a thing of the past, and we'll have peace and happiness and fairness in our society. Thank you so much, Pastor Alex Jesse. It's been an absolute honor and privilege, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue and conversation and plans for the future with you and with your community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi Benny. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me, and I know we can work together into the future for a better world.
We look forward to it. Shalom, shalom.